going to try not to bore you. My focus is meditation and brain development, meditation and health, meditation and heart disease prevention. But I'm a physicist and I can't help but torture you for a few minutes, addressing some really deep questions about mind and matter. And if you don't get little bits of this, it doesn't matter, because we'll get to the practical stuff pretty soon. So we're going to talk about what is mind, what it is. We'll talk first a little bit as a warm-up, what is matter? And matter's the stuff we're made of, basically. The universe is made of matter. Our galaxy is made of matter. And the billions and billions of galaxies, each with their hundreds of billions of suns, are made of matter. And that's our Milky Way in Iowa, where I live. I don't know what it looks like here in the city. And when you look around our own galaxy, you just see some amazing things. These gas and dust clouds, called the pillars of creation, are scattered throughout our solar system and scattered throughout our galaxy. Can you see that sort of? And these are all the results of, in this case, 3 different exploded stars.
Gigantic supergalaxies.
Yeah. So these 3 huge dust clouds are the consequence of 3 giant exploded stars. And when the star blows out 90% of all of its contents out into space, new stars and new planets can form in these dust clouds. Our sun was hatched in a cloud like this. Planet Earth came out of a cloud like this. But in the early universe, before these things happened, there were no planets. Excuse me, because there was only hydrogen and helium. This is one of these exploding stars. I'll just show some pictures. And this thing is very odd. This is called a quasar. It's far, far away. We're looking back 11 or 12 billion years in time, because we're looking at something that is 11 or 12 billion light years away. Okay. How loud can I go without breaking the speaker? Is that okay? I can speak up. It's probably fine. Okay, so anyway, I won't dwell on this thing so much except to say that out of this thing, this quasar, 12 billion light years away, you see these jets of water coming out. And as this article describes, in this water coming out, you have more water in this spray coming out, 140 billion times as much water as we have on planet Earth's oceans. Anyway, the universe is a wild place. One of the great mysteries, actually, is our black holes. What is going on inside a black hole? It's an incredible mystery, recently unraveled by what is called string theory or unified field theory. And that deep mystery is probably not this. But in any case, there you have it. So that's our that's our galaxy. And if you have a halfway decent backyard telescope, and you don't, instead of looking in the Milky Way stripe where most of our stars are located in our galaxy, you turn your telescope instead away from the Milky stripe out into deep space where there are fewer stars. You see more galaxies than stars. And each of these galaxies is like its own island universe with hundreds of billions of suns. And the latest favored answer to how many of these galaxies there are is infinity, which is a disturbingly large number when you really dwell on it. Okay, enough. That's outer space. We're going to talk much more about inner space. And like an iceberg, what you can see on the surface of the water is only maybe 10% of the full mass of an iceberg. Most of it is hidden. Most of it is underground. And like that, when we look at the universe, you have the observable world, the physical world of people and table and brunches and planets, matter. But all the matter of the universe is really just the surface crust of the world. The universe is built in layers of creation, layer upon layer upon layer of creation. And the surface, the macroscopic, visible world that we can see, is clearly what we're mostly absorbed in all the time. It's what our eyes can see. What our eyes cannot see are the inner worlds. They're too small to see. You can't hardly even see a human cell because it's too small. With a microscope, yes. But then there are molecules that make up the cell, vastly smaller. There are atoms that make up the molecules, much smaller. There's the protons and neutrons and electrons that make up the atoms, 1,000,000 times smaller. And millions upon millions of times smaller than that. There are different levels of the physical world, the world of fundamental particles. So just in a nutshell, the classical world is the material world. It's called brick and mortar physics. That's the physics of Sir Isaac Newton. And it's perfectly good theory as long as you restrict your awareness to the surface crust of the universe. If you try to go into the molecules and the atoms, Newton's laws don't work at all. A whole new language, a whole new logic, a whole new mathematics had to be born to understand one thing about an atom and what it is. And most of us don't know that theory because it's quantum mechanics and it's a graduate physics course primarily. So we tend to assume that atoms are made of matter and they follow the normal intuitive laws, but they don't. It's a different world, different language, different logic, different mathematics. A whole new language had to be created to understand one thing about it, anything about an atom. And if that's not enough, if you want to look at what the atom is made of, the nucleus and nuclear particles, they're, 1,000,000 times smaller. And a whole new language, a whole new logic, a whole new mathematics had to be created to understand the subatomic world. And in the last couple of decades, that the level of the fundamental particles and forces of nature has been evolving to become more simplified, more unified. The electrowave unified theory was given to my thesis advisor for discovering that 2 of the 4 forces of nature are actually one when viewed at a deeper level. And I introduced this grand unification where 3 of the 4 forces of nature, the nuclear force, the radioactive force, the electromagnetic force, are one at an even much, much, much deeper level of nature. And I was a little younger at that time. And then in more recent times, the unified field, the quantum grand unification has evolved into what is called superunification, or completely unified field theory, where all the fundamental forces and particles of nature that make up everything are one universal, unified field of nature's intelligence at the foundation of everything, at the foundation of space and time itself. So that fundamental unity at the foundation of all diversity of creation is called the unified field. It was there before this universe emerged, 13.8 billion years ago. And it'll be there when this universe ceases to be in another 16 billion years or so. Don't worry about the time. It's certainly tell your children to be careful. So this unified field, what is it? It's like an ocean that transcends space and time. It's universal. The universe emerges from there, as I've said. The mechanics of that is now relatively well known. But what basically happens is, at its core, it's like the Pacific Ocean, or the Atlantic Ocean, which is right behind me. The Atlantic Ocean is quiet at its depth, but dynamic on the surface. And it's on the surface of this ocean of what pure existence are waves of vibration. And those waves of vibration at the time of the Big Bang are actually quite violent waves of excitation. And this ocean of pure existence percolates bubbles like ginger ale, more or less, percolates bubbles. These bubbles aren't ginger ale, actually. And I'm going to skip all this, but I just will mention for those who've heard the word. These bubbles that percolate out of this ocean of pure existence are actually in the form of, you could say, rubber bands. They're not made of rubber. Nothing is made of matter down here. This is really more a conceptual world. You get to the atom and beyond, we're not living in a physical world. We're living in a wholly conceptual world. What we consider matter is a surface phenomenon. Deep within that surface are the subtler worlds of quantum mechanics, which are non-material. They're more a conceptual universe. Are you saying, well, we're made of a concept? Ultimately, yes. Whose concept? I'm not at liberty to answer that question. But it wasn't mine. So anyway, percolating out of this are little vibrating loops, and those loops actually show up as particles. Those vibrating loops have energy, they move, they have momentum, they behave like tiny, these are tiny loops. They look like particles to us. They act like particles to us. And from there, the nucleus is formed, the atoms are formed, the molecules are formed. So this is the whole structure. This layers of creation, from surface relativity of matter to the deeper worlds that underlie matter. Okay. Again, those are called superstrings. And a vibrating loop will mimic an electron or a graviton or anything else on the basis of how the loop is vibrating. Clockwise vibrating loops play the role of gravity. Counterclockwise vibrating loops play the role of electromagnetism and the nuclear force, etc. And more complicated forms of vibration of a rubber band represents our lunch today. The quarks, the neutrons that make up the atoms in your lunch and in your physical bodies. It's actually quite simple in the end, except the math part. So that's it. Once you have the elementary particles coming out of the unified field at the bottom of this circle, well, from the elementary particles, you get your atoms and molecules and cells and people and chimps and galaxies, etc. So this is considered a great triumph of modern science. This was the fulfillment of Einstein's lifelong quest. Einstein's dream to discover, and he worked on it, and he got halfway there, the unified source of the diversified creation. Check. We are now experts in matter. But what is mind? Mind is very enigmatic. There's so much research these days and exploration into the origin of consciousness, or how the brain creates consciousness. And more physicists and more philosophers are starting to think the brain doesn't create consciousness, but it has consciousness, no question. But where does consciousness come from? What is consciousness? So here's something that is a big clue. To understand consciousness and where it comes from, let's look at what we now know about nature. Nature is structured in layers from the abstract, unbounded source to the localized particles of nature to physical bodies and brains and so forth. So these are the layers of creation. We've seen those before. But here's the point. We, you and I, are part of creation. We are built on the same structure. Our physical bodies are what we see. Behind the physical bodies are the subtler activities of the senses and the mind and the intellect and the feeling, and behind the feeling is just pure awareness. So Because we're part of nature, we're built like nature. We have atoms, we have subnuclear particles, we have the unified field at our foundation. So in terms of the structure, I'm going to look into mind specifically. Our minds are normally caught up in what we call surface thoughts. What's for lunch today? What a lovely crowd. This is really pleasant. Till this guy started speaking. So these are surface thoughts. Surface thoughts. All day long we're absorbed in our surface thoughts. Oh, I left the car running. But we're also capable of subtler thoughts, abstract reasoning, artistic sensibility. These subtler levels of mind, we call it abstract thinking, abstract reasoning, is more subtle. The brain is more settled and more expanded, and we can entertain very expansive thoughts and ideas. We can do mathematics, God forbid. We can appreciate art, philosophy. Beyond our abstract reasoning, subtler than that and more intimate to ourselves is what we call feeling. The fine feeling level. And the fine feeling level is very abstract. It's hard often to articulate your feelings. How are you feeling today, John? Oh yeah, I get that. Very precise answer. It's not a world of precision. It's a world of fine feeling, abstract. And beyond the finest feeling, and meditators will be quite aware of this, and others may less so, behind the finest feeling, when the mind settles and settles completely, is just our pure awareness, pure consciousness, pure being. Our inner subjectivity comes from here. We are awake, we experience, we are conscious. And what we don't necessarily appreciate so much is that our consciousness, which is subtler and more abstract than the subtlest thought and the subtlest feeling, being abstract like that, although it is our consciousness, it's the you inside of you. Consciousness is the you inside of you. But that I inside of me, you inside of you, is by its nature abstract. And what we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we feel, what we do is all on the level of mind and senses and action, physical actions. So this being level, this consciousness level, is sometimes called transcendental. Excuse me. Because it transcends the subtlest thought. And I'll show this really quickly, but because it's just of interest to probably handle here. The mind has these levels, okay? Surface thought, abstract reasoning, fine feeling, and pure consciousness. Mathematicians have taken this and divided the mind into many different layers of concreteness all the way to the most abstract. And they've invented languages for every one of these levels of our mind. Service mind, service behavior. The number system that's relevant to day-to-day living is the counting numbers. 1, 2, 3, go to the store, buy 3 apples. You don't say, go to the store and buy pi apples or negative 15 apples. The counting numbers are perfectly good for our day-to-day living. But there are subtler levels of mind, and I won't list them all, whole numbers, integers, rationals. Every one of these deeper levels is more expanded, more expansive, more complete, more powerful. To do physics, even the simplest physics, Newtonian physics, you have to go halfway down this chart to the real numbers. To do quantum mechanics, you have to go deeper into complex numbers. To do quantum field theory, you have to go deeper into function spaces. To get the unified field, you've got to go to the foundation of mind. So the structure of our mind is, I'll show you, parallel to the structure of nature. First of all, these represent more expansive layers of consciousness. This is where David Lynch says, the big fish swim. He catches his big ideas at the most expansive and abstract level, so abstract that he can't articulate it at all, but it's just a fine feeling that over time he revisits it, and then the details start to emerge. This is where the world-changing ideas live, of physics, of chemistry, of medicine, at the deepest level. And here's the point. Every level of our mind, in the mathematics, the language of that level, corresponds to the different levels of physical nature. Deeper levels of mind, deeper, more powerful mathematical languages fit nature at each level like a glove. And because of that incredible structural parallel between our human mind and between physical nature, Einstein and Wigner and many, many, many others since then all believed that the fact that that consciousness, the origin of mind, at the foundation of our mind, our feelings, our experiences, in the unified field at the foundation of physical nature, must be the same. That the source of consciousness and ultimately source of mind and the source of physical nature must be from that same source. Of course, that's where everything comes from anyway. So ultimately, yes, our consciousness and the rest of us must also come from that unified field. Now, take a breath. Now we're going to get practical. Now, my definition of practical is like way abstract. So what is meditation? Classically speaking, throughout the long eons of time, meditation mostly comes from the yogic tradition, which includes things like asanas and pranayama, but it's mostly about meditation. The Buddhist meditation system came directly from here also. What meditation is, we can understand. We are sitting here with our surface thoughts. And naturally, our mind, speech, and attention is directed outward. When you have all of these people to enjoy and the delicious food, who's going to go within and start to fathom those deeper, wider oceans? We're just naturally drawn out. Meditation, though, is a technique or techniques which basically turn the direction of our attention around, turn the direction of our attention within. So we start to experience thoughts. Now, normally, in this next slide, maybe you can see it. Not really. Thoughts bubble up from deep within, and they burst into the mind as a thought. But now in meditation, you have a technique that automatically leads the mind within to experience and enjoy deeper, more expansive, more pleasing, more blissful levels of mind, slipping beyond the most abstract thought to experience purely consciousness. And the technique, if it's good technique and a natural technique, will lead you there in minutes. And then you're left with an amazing experience, which is a very ordinary experience, but at first, if you haven't had it very often, it's an amazing experience to be sitting there in this unbounded, abstract state of consciousness alone, which is one's own very self. And that meditative state, as it's called, or transcendence, is also called samadhi in the language of yoga. Language of yoga, again, is mostly about this experience. And the Yoga Sutras, which are the classic text of yoga, begin with a simple phrase. The first verse is yoga, which means the experience of, yoga means unity. To experience that inner unity of life is just simply the complete settling of the activity of the mind. In the second verse on the bottom reads, then the seer, then the knower, is established in the self. Self with a big S. Not self, John Hagelin, whichever political party or PhD, this or that. But John Hagelin or Joanna Plasky, inner being. The you inside of you, you're left with yourself. I call it capital S self. Not one's political party, not one's degree. It's your own inner being. And fortunately, with the technique, that experience is natural and effortless and rather quick. So in the literature of yoga, I'll read it to you because I like this. The literature of yoga describes that state, samadhi, it's also called, transcending, the peaceful, the blissful, the undivided or unified is thought to be the fourth state of consciousness. Not waking, not sleeping, not dreaming, just pure consciousness. That is the self of all. That is to be known. Or in scientific terms, back in 1970, that was discovered by physiologists as a fourth, this meditative state, fourth major state of human consciousness. Not waking, not dreaming, not sleeping. They call it a hypometabolic physiological state, which basically means a state of deep rest. Deep physiological, deep mental rest. With a unique style of functioning of the brain, a very highly coherent state of functioning of the brain, and a level of rest that is much deeper than deep sleep. But 2.4 times deeper than the deepest rest gained during a night's sleep. It was very restful. And, as you might expect, that very deep relaxation dissolves anxiety, which is an increasingly troubling, widespread symptom of the world today. Not that there hasn't always been a lot of it, but right now the statistics are really bad, especially for young people. So many meditation practices have been studied. By far the one that is most effective and simplest is the transcending, age-old technique to take the mind back to its source. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that have come out in the last couple of weeks that are quite amazing. But first, this research has been done over 40 years by insurance companies. Insurance companies do a lot of work, a lot of research on disease, and they're very interested in anything that can reduce disease, because disease is where they spend the money. They collect the money and they don't even have to spend it if nobody gets ill. So they are champions of health. And interestingly, over 40 years of research, every single category of disease, incidence and expenditure is markedly down in populations that practice this transcending, practice this meditation. Except childbirth, but honestly, it's hard to think of that as a disease. I mean, people want to have a baby, and they still have them, which is a warning. TM, transcendental meditation, is not an effective prophylactic. Okay, and very recently, new guidelines, and I expected this to happen, but I was surprised when it did. It took a long time. The American College of Cardiology, the American Heart Association, endorsed by the American Medical Association, came out with this year's guidelines for medical doctors. What should medical doctors tell their patients to do? How should they treat their patients? What medicines? What this? What that? It's a big, thick thing. But when it comes to heart disease and high blood pressure, they came out uniquely recommending transcendental meditation. And everybody's getting aware of more and more of anxiety reducers, relaxation technologies, stress reducing technologies. But the only one that is held up to the medical standard that has statistical significance and clinical significance is transcending. So TM was the only meditation program that they named. And in addition to this, these were mostly about blood pressure. But blood pressure is a leading cause of heart incidents, heart attack and stroke. In long government study now, 10 years now, it started as a 5-year study, showed a 2/3 reduction in heart attack, stroke, and death due to heart disease among the patients who were practicing TM. So that's very significant because it's the world's #1 killer. So I'll leave that subject for now. The subject of health, relaxation, enjoyment of life comes with being not stressed. and just move on to a couple points. I want to talk a little bit more, because the experience is fascinating and very blissful, more about this transcending experience, the so-called samadhi. Well, for one thing, in this meditative state, let's call it, the orderliness of brain functioning, the coherent functioning of the brain goes way up. Normally, if you look on the left and you ignore this picture, here, let's take a look at it without this picture. On the left, our neurons are firing, and you can measure how they're firing and where they're firing by electrodes on the scalp. It's called electroencephalogram. Most of us have had one, I'm sure. But when you look at the brain as a whole, there's not much linkage, there's not much communication, there's not much coordination between different parts of the brain. Some neighboring areas, but the rest of it is a bit of chaos. And it's a lot like an orchestra. You get there, the conductor has not yet stepped up to take the stand, and people are sitting there in the orchestra sawing away at their instruments, creating a hell of a noise. But when the conductor comes in and takes her stand and waves the baton, suddenly that incoherent noise gets transformed into flowing music. And when the brain gets into this expansive, transcendental quiet, the whole brain becomes highly synchronous. And that synchronous functioning of the brain becomes more stable over time, so it's not just during meditation, it's more orderly thinking, more clear speech, more intelligence in activity, which is where you want it, which is where you need it. So as a consequence of that, is meditation experience correlates with rising IQ, significant, substantial rising IQ, and that's not something we normally see in life. Improved academic performance, improved executive functioning, improved learning ability, more creativity, faster reaction time. And the growth of intelligence as a result of regular meditation over a year or 2 or 3 is very significant. And as a consequence of this, there are 11,000, 12,000 maybe schools that have incorporated TM pardon me, as part of the classroom day. It started in San Francisco, not surprising. It's kind of an open-minded liberal city. And what happened was, there's always is this religious? I don't want my Billy learning some foreign thing. A lot of resistance from the parents sometimes. But then it changed, and the parents said, we insist on having this, because there's something called ADHD. It's a stress-related learning disorder, largely among children and adults, is reversed in 10 weeks of regular practice of TM. So the parents were saying, my little Jimmy needs this, and we want to have it. So it started in San Francisco, spread throughout the Bay Area, and now it's in countries all over the world. And I didn't think that was going to happen, because the religious thing, people sometimes are really virulently bound to their religious beliefs, which is fine, but they don't want their children experimenting with something that don't sound Christian, or whatever the case may be. So this took a while. And then a few points about that experience. You think, well, what's transcending like? It's like fireworks going off? No, it's pure, absolute abstraction. You can say it's unbounded awareness, because there are no boundaries to the experience that cramp the attention onto this, that, or that. So the attention relaxes, it expands, and it settles. This inner unity is starkly different from our outer tremendous diversity. The inner world is never changing, it's reliable, secure. And the outer world is far from reliable sometimes, it's ever changing. Inner silence and outer dynamism. And I'll sort of end with this point. Meditation traditionally is, yes, to slip beyond relative experience and let the mind expand and be the blissful nature of what it is, what we are. But more than that, the idea was to practice regularly so that the brain is accustomed to and competent to uphold that inner expanded vision, expanded perspective, expanded inner silence, along with outer activity. So now you're engaged in activity, and you're feeling super clear, super fresh, super productive, and yet all the success and dynamism and action and thinking doesn't mask, doesn't overthrow the inner stillness. So that inner silence remains with you, even in outer activity, even in the deepest sleep. You're now there, a witness to the mind and body sleeping, a silent witness. And sleeping's probably my favorite state of consciousness. But nobody experiences sleeping until they're awake, silently awake, and witnessing that sleep. And then dreaming, you're dreaming, but you're a witness to the dreams, and there's no fear or tension involved. So it's stabilizing inner silence, and that's traditionally called enlightenment. Big fancy word called enlightenment, which physiologically just means total brain functioning. The whole brain is integrated and connected in every aspect. The full power of the brain is being used on whatever you do, because whatever you do is integrated now with everything else. So the brain waves that are so coherent during TM on the left, for long-term meditators on the right, that coherent brain functioning is there 24/7. All right. And I'll say this is the last thing I'll say about meditation, and then we'll stop. I can actually go back and share some wonderful news about world peace, because we really desperately need something in that area right now. But I'll end with this for the time being, at least. See if there are questions. So in waking consciousness, we have pretty much our life is our gross sensory world and the thoughts that are behind that sensory experience. So thoughts, perceptions, the senses, the mind, this is kind of our surface reality. The deepest inner reality is this non-changing, naturally contented, expansive inner consciousness. And that's only there usually during this transcending experience. But with time, it does become a stable part of your inner world. And that's when you have pure consciousness alongside all of the dynamism of outer activity. Then you're stable as a rock. Your inner reality, and you are your inner, remember, you are your consciousness, but you hardly ever experience yourself, your consciousness, except during transcending, and then 24/7 you experience what you are, expansive reality, even in activity, just from regular practice. Okay, so I think that's kind of it. That's kind of it for meditation, and we can talk a little bit about peace, but that's plenty. Honestly, it's probably much more, and you've probably got indigestion now. So, are there any points of clarification or any questions? Yes.
How would this relate to Alzheimer's? How
Well,
can this help?
All right, that's a very good point.
I'll repeat the question.
Yeah.
How does this relate to Alzheimer's? Can this meditation have an effect on preventing Alzheimer's?
At this point, although there's been research on almost everything else with very, very positive benefits across the whole board of that I showed you, all the categories, Alzheimer's is just getting started. So when I speak about that, it would be speculative. And I'll speculate. For people who might be getting foggy, the clarity that comes with vision, with brain, speech, thinking, is much better cumulatively. IQ is growing cumulatively. Now, if you have the internal chemistry that's responsible for Alzheimer's growing, you've got a little bit of a battle there. You've got the brain expanding at its experience, laying down new connections all the time. As the awareness expands, parts of the brain that haven't been communicating very much are now strengthening those communications with more connections between neurons than we have had before. Meanwhile, Alzheimer's is sort of working on the opposite. Which wins out in the end is still to be seen. But laying down more fresh connections in the brain through transcending and expanding awareness has to help. Even if it eventually is overtaken, if the race is overtaken by Alzheimer's. So, based on my understanding of the brain, it has to help. But there's no research I can point to yet, although there's a lot of interest in starting research in this area. It's a big deal in our age. We're living longer. It may be some of the foods we've grown up on are a little less natural than our grandparents maybe grew up on. That could all have an effect. So it's a very good question. I wish I had a solid answer for it, but my understanding would strongly suggest it will help at least.
Other questions? Yes.
I've been finding myself meditating for not 20 minutes, but for an hour, hour and a half at a time. Does it just keep developing the more you stay in them, or do you reach transcendence and that's where you are?
So are you practicing transcendental meditation?
Yes.
Okay. So normally, because people have responsibilities and they have a practical life and they may have children, we would generally recommend 20 minutes twice a day. By all means, talk to your TM teacher. If you don't have that much by way of responsibility, you can meditate longer.
I do it in the middle of the night, so at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I get up and meditate for an hour or so.
It's a very good time to meditate. If nothing else, it'll certainly increase the depth and power of your sleep, and it may help you get back to sleep also, which is good too. So when you're meditating, you're meditating. During that time, you probably will slip into that at least momentary state of absolute abstraction, and sometimes a real thrill will bubble up inside your nervous system, thrill of joy, thrill of bliss. And that's very personal. How often, how long that happens is very individual, but that'll happen more and more. And the benefits in activity will be growing also. So obviously you're already doing it well, and those benefits are already there, I'm sure, to a good extent, and will continue to grow.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
I've read about the Higgs boson.
Yeah.
I'm a meditator. I understand a little bit about a mantra.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about the frequency or the vibration of Higgs boson that they discovered? And if there's a connection with the mantra concept.
Did everyone hear the question?
No.
Could anyone understand the question? No.
So the gentleman has asked about the Higgs boson, the so-called God particle of physics, which was discovered probably 15, 20 years ago by now, by my thesis advisors. It was their theory. And what might that have to do with the vibrations that have to do with meditation, maybe? Well, despite the name God particle, which I think is a slight exaggeration, the Higgs particle is a very important particle because without that particle, which didn't really show up and do its thing until halfway through the life of the universe, but when it showed up and did its thing, at some point in the history of the universe, suddenly particles gained a mass. And before the Higgs boson, all particles were massless, like the photon is massless. And all particles, therefore, could travel only at the speed of light. And if all particles in the universe are traveling at the speed of light, they're not going to connect with each other and form atoms and molecules and people and chimps. So it's a chimp-free world. And even worse than not being able to form anything, because particles moving at the speed of light don't stick together. So instead of sticking together and forming life planets, they also just traveled at the speed of light. Now the speed of light, and I'm only going to do this really short because it may confound you some. The speed of light's really fast, you could say. To get from here to the sun, take about 6 minutes traveling the speed of light. Speed of light is about 25, 27 rotations of the Earth per second. Fast. But really the speed of light, although it appears fast from the outside, is actually infinite. So if you want to travel to the Andromeda Galaxy, our neighboring galaxy, which is 2 million light years away, and we shoot a powerful flashlight at it, we have to wait 2 million years for the light to get there. But if you're riding on the photon and you're going at the speed of light yourself, if you're the one traveling at the speed of light, funny things happen to space. And what happens is the actual distance between the Andromeda Galaxy and the Milky Way Galaxy, planet Earth, shrinks the faster you go. And if you really make it to the speed of light, that distance shrinks to 0. So if you got Elon Musk's money and can afford the fuel to accelerate a rocket ship very, very close to the speed of light, you'll be there, probably practically speaking, in a couple of years. Whereas we back at home are waiting 2 billion years for you to get there. So space-time is funny. But anyway, before the Higgs boson, everything was moving at the speed of light. So there literally was not even time. Time didn't even exist then. Time could have came with the God particle, and maybe that's one of the reasons some people call it the God particle, because once you've got time, stuff can happen. So the Higgs boson gave all the other particles the masses that they do, proton mass and the photon mass and so forth. And then we can build the universe, or somebody built the universe. So what that has to do with TM necessarily is there's something transcendental about the speed of light, because at that level there's no time and there's no distance. So the taste of that in transcending, but I wouldn't necessarily know how to connect the two in any other way.
Yes, next question.
Thank you. In the balancing of the mind and science in healing, where would we be with our students of biochemistry in using that science for healing and how we can balance the two?
Well, of course, biochemistry is a really important science at the foundation of medicine and many, many technologies. And there you're using the molecular world made of atoms bound together into exotic, in some cases, molecules to correct imbalances in the body, for example, to add something that you don't have enough of, or to create a chemical reaction that might get rid of something that you have too much of. So the science of medicine has really grown very sophisticated. What you're doing with TM more is you're unlocking the body's own natural intelligence, deepest healing intelligence, and you really do accelerate healing with meditation of diseases of the mind and diseases of the body. And we saw that in the research from the insurance companies. And also NYU was part of a 10-year longitudinal study funded by the National Institutes of Health by $27 million. There's been really great research to see how TM prevents and reverses many diseases. And the longevity, lifespan, is something like 9 to 12 years longer on average between meditators who are regular with their practice and non-meditators. And when I was a little younger, 9 years, what's 9 years on top of infinity is nothing. My age, 9 years, it's good. I can see the benefit of that. But also 9 years of good quality mind, good quality health. It's a precious thing. I just wish everybody did it, but it didn't exist on Earth for at least hundreds of years before this technique directly from the Yoga Sutras was rediscovered. And now we have it. And it is spreading. But in today's very distracted environment, people don't seem to have time to really look deeply into their own deepest aspirations. And so the number of people learning is a little slower than it was during the Beatles, for example, or in those earlier days. Still a good number of millions in the US have learned, but it should be hundreds of millions. We have a very different world, health-wise. Yeah. Now I just got to say one thing about world peace. And this really will be 3 minutes or less, if I can get there. Okay. Recently I was asked to give the closing address at the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates, which is a huge conference every other year. And they put me last for a good reason. In terms of, it's called a closing keynote address. It's a 3-day conference. There were 3,000 people in the audience. It was depressing. And all the living Nobel laureates spoke. But it was depressing because there were no solutions. And it was obvious that there are no solutions. But I told them there was at least one approach that could work, and so they put me last. And the MC said, now we'll begin our conclusion phase. We asked Dr. Hagelin to present a solution, he emphasized, to these serious global problems. And I presented what we're calling a new science of peace. But it's really just peace from the inside out. The Global Union of Scientists for Peace, an organization of Nobel laureates and leading scholars, had their founding meeting 2 weeks before the outbreak of the Ukraine war in an effort to hopefully stop that, and we were not able to do so. But what got really excited at that time was what they called the brain-based approach to peace. Really excited about that. The whole conference sort of turned into that. And the basic principle is really simple. Individual stress, acute stress, is what drives people to violent actions, extreme actions, desperation. On a societal level, different societies at different times have more or less stress, psychological stress, psychosocial stress. And right now, according to the Surgeon General, we're living in an epidemic of stress. And as a consequence, epidemic levels of emotional mental problems and epidemic levels of violence and antisocial behavior. Stresses caused by what? Stressors like poverty, oppression, injustice, prejudice, fear. And if you want to, let me say this, read this in yellow. It says, the first stage in the emergence of war is mounting societal stress, acute political, ethnic, and religious tensions in critical hotspots throughout the world. These mounting tensions, if unchecked, frequently erupt into social conflict. This is the number one cause of stress in people who study war. Number one cause of war to people who study war. So what do you do about it? Can you reduce the stressors? Can you get rid of poverty and oppression and injustice or prejudice? Well, maybe someday. We're not going to do that this week. Or, instead of reducing the stressors, just reduce the stress. And these days, as you know, and TM is certainly first among these, evidence-based meditation practices, I'd say especially TM, markedly reduce stress and its effects on the brain and behavior. And you should note this. This is I'm really almost done. You should note that the Pentagon, the U.S. military, and the Veterans Administration hospitals have now turned to TM as their number one cure for what's called post-traumatic stress disorder, the most acute stress from horrific experiences in the height of combat. And TM turned out to be far easier, certainly far cheaper, without trauma, very quick. They more quickly and more deeply got rid of that very, very acute stress, which can destroy a person's life for life. TM has been used in prisons all over the world to make maximum security felons, murderers, not go back to prison. It's been a very, very powerful recidivism tool to actually help the person actually get rehabilitated, which is what prisons are for, but what prisons generally do not provide. So finally, on a societal scale, for a long time it's been found that cities and towns, states, where there are lots and lots of meditators, have substantial reductions in their crime rates. And this has been going on for 45 years, these studies. I was lucky enough to conduct this public experiment in Washington, D.C. in the summer of 1993, where 4,000 volunteers from 100 countries, advanced meditators, came to meditate in a group. This is the size we felt we needed to put an immediate take a bite out of crime, as they say, in Washington, D.C. To make a long story short, the FBI, the police department were key members of this whole major study. We predicted 24.6%. There was about a 25% drop in crime during that immediately. As soon as you hit the brown level there, it's when the big group arrived, stayed for 3 weeks, and had to go home and back to work. But it was highly statistically significant. And the whole atmosphere of the city, it was a headline in the Washington Post, had completely transformed. So dropping crime and even turning off war During the peak war, this is the last study, war in the Middle East, during the war of the mid-1980s, there was a long-standing, very violent war. And so this is the first study of this type ever done. Some scholars put together a meditating group of 700 to 1,000 people right in the heart of Jerusalem for 60 days. And when they could come together and meditate as a group especially, they would do so. And the yellow line shows where they were able to get together in significant number. The yellow areas show where the numbers of meditators were high. And the solid line shows progress towards peace during that war. And it was a highly statistically significant effect. And the leading journal in this field, the Journal of Conflict Resolution of Yale University, published this with a cover note to the reader. We had to publish the study. The design was impeccable. The statistical significance was almost unheard of in terms of the seriousness of the effect. But we don't understand how it works exactly. We want other scientists, please, to go back and repeat this study, because if this is true, if this works, we have a very, very important tool for the prevention of war. And in the next 2.25 years, 6 other scientific groups gathered, repeated the study, slightly different size groups, different distances from the heart of the war, but every one of them had the same incredibly powerful, effective piece. So this has now been done not just twice, but 59 studies published in 38 journals have shown that this effect of reducing individual stress has an effect, especially if a lot of people are involved in getting calm and expansive and harmonious. The whole society clicks into a different kind of state of functioning. So I just wanted to mention that, something I'm working very hard on with others, something many presidents now and heads of state have adopted and are using, but it's something that I'd like to see used here and around the world. That's it. Thank you.
Yes.
I was wondering, how did the Nobel laureates respond to your
The
presentation?
question was, how did the Nobel laureates respond to the presentation?
Oh, it was the only standing ovation of the 3-day conference. And the young people, there are about 1,000 students, handpicked out of 40,000 students who applied to come, were wild. They were so relieved because by then, they were really discouraged to hear nothing but bad news. So that's why I was invited to give the same talk the next year. So it went well. It went well. It's catching on, but slowly. People have their own lives, unfortunately. Yes.
Yes, another question.
This is an extension of the same question. The academic places are now having courses in leadership. And I wonder if they're talking about TM.
I know one such program that uses TM, but generally speaking, I don't think we're that well known. So probably not. But, leadership, what does it take to be a leader? You have to be aware. You have to be aware of the circumstances. You have to be at your clearest, at your most energetic, at your most upbeat, if you want to inspire others. Charisma. Intelligence, wide intelligence. The world is complicated. Problems are complicated. To piece together the solution to a complicated problem involves many elements at once. Only when the mind can expand and subsume, can comprehend all of that detail, and then by seeing it all, integrate it all into a practical solution, takes expanded awareness. Physicists, myself and many, get our best breakthroughs when we stop studying. You say, I gotta take a minute's rest. You take a minute's rest or 10 minutes rest and bang, you've got the answer. Because the awareness has been able to now expand to the point where the different pieces can be brought together in a whole.
It's inner peace. It's inner peace.
It is inner peace. Yes.
Sure.
Wanted to thank Dr. Hagelin for coming and joining us, flying in from the US.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
For those of you who are interested in learning Transcendental Meditation or learning more about it, I'll ask the people who are teaching Transcendental Meditation to stand up for a minute. Go ahead, Michael, and Rick, and Melody over here, and myself. And our office to learn Transcendental Meditation, if you can get here, you can get to our office because it's right down the hall. Really down at the end of the hall. And we're teaching courses of Transcendental Meditation, and we're happy to invite all of you to come and learn. And once more, we wanted to thank Dale Coder and all of the people who she invited here to Painesville. Really one of the leading voices in Palm Beach and the voice of integrating so many different kinds of people together, so many interests, so connecting people.
Thank you.
You're really a great connector.
And that's special thank you to Debbie for coordinating everything. Oh, Debbie, yes. Hey, Debbie. Debbie. And a special thank you. To Janet for being so flexible and serving us so well. Thank you. Okay.
Salite has said, if we'd like, we can stay, but we'll have to order dinner. So
We're going.
thank you very much, everybody.
You're coming to my house?
Oh, maybe.
See,
Do we have room in the center? Because I still have to